From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
Logjams in Congress, infrastructure crumbling, public distrust in government high. If you feel like things simply don't work these days, you're not alone. A new book argues that in many respects, Americans' public sector is broken and that the Democratic Party in particular has some soul searching to do. But what is the solution, and is the answer to tear bureaucracy down or build it up? This week on Newsmakers, fellow at Brown University's Watson Institute and author of Why Nothing Works, Marc Dunkelman. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi. Later on in the program, we'll be joined by 12 News Politics editor, that's you, analyst Joe Fleming for a political roundtable, but we are joined by Marc Dunkelman. He's fellow at Brown University's Watson Institute and author of Why Nothing Works. Congratulations, Marc. It's a thoroughly researched book and I'm enjoying it very much, so thank you for being here.
How many years have you been working on it?
I mean, basically a decade.
Wow, that's a long time. Okay, so look, at the risk of oversimplifying the thesis of your book, I'm going to take a shot at it here. You spell out how progressivism has been a tortured marriage between two ideals. Jeffersonian, which is like power of the people, distrust of big business and bureaucracy, and Hamiltonian, which is effective big government, centralized expertise that can fix things, that can build things, and keep business in check through robust regulation. You suggest that the progressive pendulum has swung too far to Jeffersonian, and that has hamstrung getting things done. You write, quote, the Jeffersonian retrenchment has run its course. Is that fair?
Yes.
So when I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, Why Nothing Works, great catchy title. Is a more accurate title Why Progressivism is Broken?
Well, broken is a strong term. But yes, I mean, I think that we are undermining ourselves. We have been screaming about Donald Trump now for 10 years. It has not worked for us politically, and we are not focused on the sort of central challenge, which is that the government, we Democrats are the party of government. Government isn't working, and that is a reason for people to vote against us. So we, rather than talking about what the other side is doing, need to focus on what is our product, which is a functioning government that improves people's lives in ways that they can see, touch, and feel. That's
not to suggest, though, that Democrats shouldn't be openly critical of policies that they don't disagree with on the other side of the aisle.
No, we should stand strong. But the point is, our reflex in too many cases is to blame the other side rather than look sort of directly at the things that we want to do and ask ourselves, are they being done effectively?
I just want to do a quick definitional thing for the viewers. So, you talk about progressivism, Tim just said, but you're not talking about kind of necessarily the current progressive as a synonym for the left wing of the Democratic Party. You're talking about that all the way back to Woodrow Wilson, Teddy Roosevelt, kind of fix things in government version of it.
Yes, there's no perfect term for the people that I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who aren't conservatives, right? I'm basically talking about everyone from the liberal left to sort of the moderates who say to themselves, here we have government, how are we going to use this tool?
But don't a lot of conservatives identify sort of that as a Jeffersonian, sort of the pushing against big government, which is traditionally thought of as, Democratic ideal, and that power to the people? I mean, Donald Trump, whatever you think of him, is a populist, right? So don't a lot of conservatives identify as a Jeffersonian in a way?
I mean, that's an important nuance. Yes, there is a sort of, within the conservative tradition, which I don't really try to get into in this book, there is sort of a notion that government is bad. I think that what's sort of interesting is that within progressivism, certainly over the last 50 years, we have taken a view that anyone who has power is inherently bad, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So since Vietnam, Watergate, the counterculture, the famous book called The Power Broker by Robert Caro, about a particularly powerful figure in New York, progressives themselves have looked at big institutions of all sorts and been worried that they are going to make bad decisions that don't.
Well, they have, a lot of them.
In many cases. So that if you hear it like that, it sounds like progressives are themselves conservative, and there is sort of a Jeffersonian, that sort of cynicism or skepticism about big institutions is something you would think is a conservative notion, but what we progressives aren't grappling with is that it's become part of our tradition, if not the dominant part of our tradition. Our view often is that big bureaucracies are a scourge, and that's in part because they've done bad things, but it's in part because they are, in some cases, a real burden on people.
Well, it's fascinating because you have this tension, clearly, that really you spell out in the book between progressives or Democrats, whatever term we want, calling for big national efforts on a host of issues, climate change and infrastructure and rebuilding the middle class and all this, combined with a desire to have so many ways to veto projects and distrust of the large institutions that might do them, et cetera, et cetera. I want to get concrete and local on this. I kept thinking of the pallet shelters in Rhode Island.
Yep.
So that months-long struggle to open what were boxes, effectively, with a little bit of stuff in them, but not much to them. There had been like an agreement that the government in Rhode Island wanted to open these for people who were homeless, and yet the same government that had said we want to do this couldn't seem to get itself aligned to open them for, I think it was almost a year in the end.
Yeah, I mean, there's a situation where you've got different parts of this behemoth government in the scheme of things, all with different priorities. So there are folks in the government who want to deal with homelessness. There are folks in the government who are worried about fire safety. There are folks in the government who are worried about zoning. There are folks in the government who are worried about the property tax base, right? You have all of these challenges, and rather than having someone who can sort of say, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut through the morass here. I understand everyone's concerns. Here's the compromise. What we've done is we've empowered all of these different institutions, the fire marshal, the housing department, all of them have these roles to play, and none of them can trump the other. So they end up fighting with one another rather than actually delivering. That way of governing is a progressive innovation born from the fact that three generations ago, there used to be too many powerful establishment figures who wore gray suits and had fedoras and held themselves like this and frowned and could make decisions willy-nilly, without taking any public input. And we saw what those establishment figures did, often terrible things, cutting highways through vibrant urban neighborhoods, doing slum clearance so that whole blocks were brought to rubble, and we put checks on them, and now we're seeing that there's so many checks that you actually can't get things done.
All right, we're going to take a break here on Newsmakers. When we come back, a great story about a guy who wanted to fix a skating rink in New York City. Trust me on this one. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, 12 News Politics editor. Ted Nesi, our guest, is Marc Dunkelman. He wrote a book called Why Nothing Works. And Marc, I was thinking about local examples to drive home what you're advocating so our viewers could understand. And one thing that jumped out in my mind, and tell me if you think I'm wrong about this, is what House Speaker Joe Shekarchi is trying to do to address the housing crisis. He's passing legislation trying to pull power away from local zoning and planning. He might not like that characterization, but whatever, to thwart NIMBYism. He created a special land use calendar, a housing court, if you will, to try and streamline these cases that get log jammed in the judiciary for years and years and years, and that has started to move along. Is that kind of the example that, using a centralized government to try and address a problem directly?
Yes, I mean, housing.
Housing is a big yes.
The problems are voluminous. We can't build housing. We can't get high-speed rail. We can't, take advantages of all this clean energy that's available because it's generated in one place and has to be transmitted to another, and we can't build the wires between the two. What Speaker Shekarchi is doing, what they're trying to do all over the country, is find some balance so that someone can make an expeditious decision. And sometimes that means, often in housing, the issue is that you've got power in the community that doesn't want something built, and the person who owns the lot wants to build, a triple decker, whatever you have. The problem is actually can be solved in a Jeffersonian way by pushing power down to the person that owns the pot. That doesn't work for a high-speed rail line or a transmission line, right? There you need some person above everyone else to solve what is a tragedy of the common, right? That we would all benefit if there was more plentiful, abundant, clean energy available to put in the grid so we didn't have to burn fossil fuels. We would all benefit if you could get to Boston faster or to New York faster on a high-speed rail. But the people who would lose their homes or farms or neighborhoods in the process of straightening that rail, that right of way, get in the way. And there you do need someone sort of above to sort of ratify what would be a compromise or ratify a decision.
I'm sure you don't like the approach being taken by Elon Musk and Doge, sort of bulldozing through federal government. But there also is a part of me that feels like they too are a response to what you're talking about. This feeling that government can't be changed, can't be easily shifted by a new administration. We're just going to do things and then kind of dare the courts to tell us we can't.
Well, there is no doubt that they are a response to this problem that we've created for ourselves. We should be, as progressives, the government efficiency folks. We should be the ones calling out bureaucracies that aren't delivering. We should be the ones that are saying, why aren't we building housing? It's not just enough money. Like the Biden administration invested just billions and billions of dollars in electrical infrastructure, transmission lines, EV chargers, high-speed rail, like all these things. But they're not getting done. And that's because, in a sort of a strange way, there's this thing that they call in drag racing where you warm the tires. I don't know if you know this.
Yes.
But you're, before the race, in order to make sure your car is fast, you put your foot on the accelerator and the brake at the same time, and the wheels spin, but the car doesn't go. That's essentially what Democrats have done. We've invested billions and billions of dollars in things, and then not let the bureaucracies that have the money actually get
Nothing
done.
goes more hand in hand than progressivism and drag racing, of course, Mark.
Exactly
So, all right, look, I teased it, so I want to get to it. In the beginning of your book, the intro of it, you wrote about a great anecdote in New York City, 1980s, Woolman Rink. Can you, in a minute, kind of give the thrust of that story?
There's a little skating rink not far from the Plaza Hotel in Central Park. It was broken in the mid-1980s, and Ed Koch was mayor. Mm-hmm. He wanted to redo it, so he set out, told the Parks Department, just let's redo this rink, and they just messed it up entirely. Like they poured the concrete, they did the plumbing for the refrigerant. The whole thing was broken. When they turned it on, it didn't work, and the problem was Ed Koch, because of progressive legislation, was not able to hire a central contractor, a general contractor, to do the whole thing and just get it done. So when they've already invested millions of dollars in the thing and it doesn't work, he's sort of at wit's end, and he's like, is there anybody that can help? And a developer steps forward and says, look, I will do it for you. Give me the control of the rink. I'll just do the thing. If it's over budget, I'll pay the difference. If it takes more time, I'll pay for it. And then when it's done, I'll just give it back to you. And sure enough, the developer, who is a general contractor, finds one, does it under budget and on time, and everyone hails him a hero. What's his name? Donald Trump. So my argument in the book is that this has been Donald Trump's political play forever. Even progressives are frustrated with it.
One could also argue that sort of says, well, maybe the private sector is the answer to all the problems that you're talking about.
Well, there are certain things that the private sector does well. The truth is that in most cases, you can't just hand over the process of where the bridge is going to go to the private sector to choose. You can't just hand over to the private sector all the studies to determine whether an infrastructure project is going to be too destructive to the environment. You can't just hand over to the private sector the question of whether the cost to fishermen who don't want stanchions for wind turbines in the Narragansett Bay or in the ocean. Who ratifies what is the compromise there? The private sector is not the appropriate institution to do that. That's a job for elected officials to do.
I want to end on a little bit of a positive note, which is embedded in your book, though, is like a good news story, or what could be a good news story, it seems like, which is that there is massive potential waiting to be unlocked in blue states that have tied themselves in knots by not having transportation that works, by not building the clean energy that they're always passing laws to build, by not having housing to meet the huge demand to live here. I mean, you clearly see that the blue parts of the country where we all live could be a lot better if everyone could just sort of, I don't know, get this stuff straight. Not to say it would be easy, but.
Well, you're exactly right. And like, here's the thing, like, this is what progressivism was erected originally to do. For the first 80 years of the progressive tradition, Democrats and Republicans who were progressives did huge things. We built Social Security system. We built the Tennessee Valley Authority. We built Medicare. I mean, like, there are big institutions that work, and we've done this before. We don't want to go back to the mistakes of that age, but like, there is, not only is there potential, there's history that suggests that if we get this balance between Jeffersonian and Hamiltonian impulses right, we can have amazing progress, abundant progress in a short period of time.
All right, Mark, unfortunately, we are out of time. Again, congratulations on the book, Why Nothing Works by Marc Dunkelman. It is a great read. We'll have you back sometime, continue this conversation.
See if it got fixed.
We'll check in on how it's all working out.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back, it's never too early to talk about campaign 2026, right, Ted?
Never.
Joe Fleming joins us on Newsmakers. Stay with us. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi. We are joined now for a political roundtable with 12 News political analyst Joe Fleming, not a politics editor, like I said. I don't know if that's a demotion or a promotion.
I don't take it. Don't do it to yourself.
All right. So, look, Joe, we wanted you in because Governor Dan McKee released a video announcing he is running for a second term. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think a lot of people might have seen that, looked at the calendar and went, feels kind of early. Are they wrong?
No, they're not wrong. However, Dan McKee, I think, believes he had to start early. I think there's a number of things that he needs to do in order to build his base. I think, first off, we've seen polling that shows his approval rating fairly low. And I think it's hurt him as far as raising money, because I think a lot of people have not been convinced that he was going to run again. So I think it's hurt his fundraising. Matter of fact, Helena Foulkes has twice as much money as Dan McKee at this point. So I think by announcing he's running, it should help his fundraising go on and raise more money. I think it also, he looks to build his base of support by announcing early, try to get some people to come out and support him. Keep in mind, right now, I believe there's no credible Republican candidate who said they were going to run for governor for sure. So it comes down to a Democratic primary. Democratic primaries in Rhode Island have maybe 120,000 people voting. If it's just him and one other candidate, we're talking 60,000 votes to win. So I think he's trying to gear in on these people, try to build up a base of support. We've seen that it's a different type of announcement, because I don't think the announcement was really looking to the general population. It was looking for the politicians, the money people, to help Dan McKee in that sense.
Yeah, he'll do the event with the balloons and the
later on down the road.
Later on down the road. All right, and I want to go to a poll that you really recently did and talk to Ted about it as well, but real quick, does the fact that looking at a primary, that there are so many Democrats who may run, you already cited Helena Foulkes.
Right.
Speaker Joe Shekarchi's out there, AG Nerona, Secretary of State Greg Amari showed that they think there's blood in the water?
I think they do. I think the poll that we did where we asked about the direction of the state, only 29% said the state is moving the right direction. 48% said the state was not. That was the AFL-CIO poll.
On the
Beautiful.
Screen right now.
The thing is, within those numbers, only 42% of Democrats said the state was moving in the right directions. And I've been polling this for many years. And in most cases, Democrats are 50% or higher saying the state's going in the right direction. So this will be a sign to people thinking about running, well, there's a strong possibility I can go. But at the same time, remember, Dan McKee won the primary last time with about 35, 36% in a five-way race. So if I'm Dan McKee, the more people in the race, come on, it's better for me.
Better for him.
Yeah, and I also, I have here 17. I track Joe Fleming's polls on this number, and I know people can't see it. You're not meant to here, but I looked at all these years, 17 different polls here, and this is actually not a great number. This 29 to 48, no. Even in context of Rhode Island voters nearly always being on the grumpy side. It was in the 30s, all the way up to 42% in 2017 of people thinking things were in the right direction. So, there's a little more headwinds than maybe the governor's team has been acknowledging.
There could be. I mean, I've seen these polls have the wrong direction, like 78%. Well, yeah. Right direction, 11%. But they've never gone over 50% in the right direction. But 29% is low. So I think the governor has to get out there and sort of change the atmosphere out there. Talk about what he's accomplished if he wants to run for re-election. For example, is his message getting across on what he's done for education, what he's doing for infrastructure? Are these things getting across to the voters, or are they just saying Washington Bridge?
How much is it, though? how much is it a message they're driving, and how much do you think people just need to look around and feel like things have gotten better without him telling them they're better? Just say, it seems better.
Yeah, a lot of it is, do they feel better? Do they think the state's doing a lot of the right things? Right now, this poll shows that's not there. And we see that in national polls too at times. People think the country's going in the wrong direction. The numbers have improved quite a bit since Donald Trump became president, but they're still not the greatest. So, I mean, a lot of it's perception of how they believe things are going. And if they don't think things are going the right way, it's going to show in the polling.
I actually connected, Tim, to our conversation in the first half a little bit, right? This end, it's kind of funny to have a state where the same party wins every election every time, basically. We haven't had a Republican win a major office since 2006. In an electorate that's never happy, where you almost never have even a plurality of people saying it's going in the right direction. It's sort of like people seemingly are too turned off, a majority of voters, by the national Republicans to vote for Republicans, but they're not at all seemingly satisfied with how Democrats are running the state either.
Yeah, and you have to think that, to your point, that if Governor McKee wants to put forth all his education priorities and the successes there and getting kids back into school and just trying to push the positive message, he's going to also face headwind from his opponents that are going to be, hey, remember this bridge called the Washington Bridge and other things that are going to make it a challenge.
I mean, he wants to talk about education, absenteeism being down by 250,000, the new state health lab, life science hub, his 365 program. However, you're right. Those are there, but how much do the people know about those? How much do the people know that he was talking about education? What they do know is the education contracts with ILO before. They know about the Providence school takeover not helping that much, and they know about the Washington Bridge. Those things stick in their minds.
The governor's at home going, Joe, you're killing me. So, look, we should point out you did not conduct this poll for us. You conducted this poll for the labor union AFL-CIO. I want to ask you, besides the right direction, wrong direction, if anything jumped off the page to you, I'll tell you one thing that did to me, and Ted highlighted it to me. People love nurses.
Oh.
I mean, like, what was it,
98% favorable rating for nurses? Because you asked about a bunch of professions.
Right, we do.
We have less than a minute
we
left.
do this every year. That number is always the highest, 98, 99%. Every year, that number never gets below 97% when we ask that question.
You had a great joke in your video a video of that. You said something about, well, if you
want to run for office as a nurse, you definitely should consider it.
Your job approval ratings would be great. 30 seconds. Anything else jump off the page to you?
I just think the fact that on a lot of the issues that we polled, Democrats really support those issues. And also, we saw independents support them, not as high as Democrats. So there's a lot of support for the issues that the AFL-CIO wanted.
Like minimum wage.
Brief thought as before we go to the end of the show. Washington Bridge, which we're saying is going to be an issue in 2026. Don't forget, we still don't know how much it will cost, and we still don't know how much will be done. We don't know that till June. How does that reset the conversation?
We have the full breakdown of the poll on WPRI.com. Our thanks to Marc Dunkelman, author of Why Nothing Works. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.